Woodworking machinery can cause serious injury. Always read and understand the user manuals for all equipment used. Remember, dust, fumes, liquid, sharp or heavy moving objects can be deadly. Always wear appropriate personal protective equipment or PPE. Any omission of PPE during this presentation is to aid communication and is not an endorsement of the practice. The Nova Woodturners Guild, or NWG, its authors, presenters, and producers assume no responsibility or liability for accidents or damages resulting from the information conveyed within this presentation. Only you can keep yourself safe. Please do. If you're unsure, don't do it.
Hi. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about pin mandrels and some of the things that you can do with pin mandrels, and I'll show you how to make a pin mandrel, which is really relatively easy. Your basic pin mandrel starts out with just a bar of steel. So here we have a collection of pin mandrels and another collection of sanding discs, sanding holders, which could also be used as a blind type of mandrel. We'll talk about that a little bit later. So what we can see here is a pin mandrel basically has a flat section on it. On a lot of mine I've put a 1/2 inch end on it so that I can use it on with different holders and collets, and all of them will fit in the same collet, so I can switch easily from one pin mandrel diameter to another. So we have things, we have a 1/2 inch mandrel there, a 5/8 one here, various pins. Over here we have one that I've actually turned Morris 2 taper on, so it's all one continuous unit, so that it doesn't need to have a holder of any sort. So in use, one of these holders, we simply put the pin in the center of the holder. It's the same height as the highest part here. We'll slip our piece of wood onto it, slide the wood on. You can see it slides on very easily. And then that pin rotates on the shaft, rolls up to one side, and locks that on to the shaft, like so. So now that would turn, and we could work that. If it was blind, we could work it right around. On this one, I actually have a little center hole in there so that I could bring a live center into that when I'm roughing it out, just to take a little bit of the bounce out of the whole unit. And it lets me work on the mouth of this too. So for instance, on a duck call, which this would be, you would want to have a nice mouthpiece on that. So you need to tool a little bit in here, and by just backing this off a little bit, you can pull it back out and expose a little bit more of your wood. Run it back in so you can work on this part in here. So here I have a aluminum bar that I've turned down a 1/2 inch stub to go into my Morris taper collet, but I don't have any slot cut in it, so I thought I'd show you how we put in the slots. So the first thing to do is to mount this into our mill vise, and so we'll do that now. So I'm making sure that it's up against the fence, squared off. Tighten it down. Tighten down the clamp. Bring it up. Line it up. Get my first position. And we're ready to turn. Cut the slot. So this is a 1/4 inch high-speed steel milling bit, 4 flutes. And we're going to do this in a couple of passes. So the first thing I do is I lock in my carriage so I can't move back and forwards. Just going to advance it a little bit more. I'm going to cut a 4 mil deep slot in this. And we're going to do it in a few passes. Okay, so now we're going to check this and see how we're doing for depth. I'll show you how we do that. Alright, so we have our pin and we have our caliper. So we're going to measure the distance across and zero it. Make sure it's at 0. Lay your pin into the slot. Take it out. Take another measurement. And so I need 0.82 millimeter travel on this. So I'm going to I'm putting my caliper at the back of the machine, holding it down in place. Back it up and lock it in place, and now we should be lined up to do our cut. I'll move this down. And there we have it. We have our slot cut, and we've made our mandrel. So we're going to be making a little different chuck this time. It's going to be an expanding collet that we're going to make out of a piece of PVC pipe. I've beveled the angle on the inside of the pipe here to a 45-degree angle. And we're going to make two hubs that will have a 45-degree on this. And this is going to be mounted onto a hollow aluminum shaft. And you'll be able to tighten it up and draw this in. There'll be slots cut in this piece of plastic so it expands. And we'll have an expanding PVC collet. Okay, so let's just set this up. I've already faced off this block, and we're just going to make a little recess so that this piece of plastic fits on there perfectly. So let's get started. Check and see how much more we have to take off. I think we're there. Yep, we're there. All right. So now I've got this set up, and we're going to center drill our piece of, this is a piece of Delrin, which is a special machining plastic. And I'm just going to use a center bit and get a hole started in that, get it centered up so that we're dead center on that. Just switch up some bits. Do this in a couple of stages. So we're going to go 6, 8, and 10.5 millimeter drills to bore this out. With 9 millimeters. So now I've set up a boring bit into my carriage, and I'm going to use that to do my finish cuts. So I get a really accurate, tight fit on that shaft. Take it down incrementally. We are very, very close right now. In fact, we are there. Beautiful tight fit on that. You couldn't get that any tighter if you wanted to, really, with a drill bit. It would be very hard to get that kind of accuracy. Okay, we'll go on to the next step. Okay, now we're working on the other end of this collet. Right here I put a stop bar that's going to prevent me from going all the way through, because I'm going to thread this last little bit. And we're going to bore this out again to our aluminum shaft. Okay, so on this step, I've set up a cross slide at 45 degrees, and I'm just putting in the bevel on the end of this holder. One more little piece. And there we have it. On this last step, I'm just tapping that little hole so that we can have a rod that'll tighten this up. So I'm using my center to keep that hole straight through. Just advancing this a little bit at a time. Just keeps the hole going straight by using your lathe. Okay. Okay, so we're going to make our collet now, and this is just a little rig I have set up to drill my holes. So it's just an index plate set up on my stage here. And we just come in, drill our hole. Now we have all of our 8 holes drilled, and we'll go on and saw these out. So here I'm setting up to mark out quadrant lines so that I can make some cuts. So I have a point in here. I have this mounted. I just slide it along, and that's just making a parallel groove mark along the center line of this. So what we have is a square block, so I can rotate it 90 degrees each time, and we've now scored all of our lines on this so I can make an index for cutting the slots. Okay, and we'll do that now. So we've now cut in our block. I can get this in the center. Cut in my slots, all nice and parallel, and we can now just put on our piece that we've drilled, and away we go. So I slipped on the piece now, and you can see the holes are lined up with the cross, and we'll just go over to my handsaw place station and cut that. So our next operation is going to be to put a set screw into this component right here, which is the hub that we initially started, because we need that hub to be fixed to this shaft so it doesn't move. Since this was all set up before for center, so we're all good, I'm just going to bring in my piece. I have a 4mm drill mounted in the collet chuck. Going to center that up, and we should be right on center, right there. We're just going to drill and make a little dimple into the aluminum, and then we'll thread that, and away we'll go. Maybe we'll do 2. Hit the aluminum, just putting a little dent in the aluminum. We'll take our square block out. Actually, we'll shut this off. Take our square block out. Rotate it 90 degrees. Lock it in place again. And we'll come in and drill a hole 90 degrees to that one. Little dimple in the aluminum, and there we go. And we're going to tap this. This Delrin is a exceptionally good plastic for cutting taps in, for machining. It's much better than high density polyethylene. For this operation, I'm using a spiral cutting tap. Which tends that you can cut without it having to back the tap off all the time. We'll do the other side for 2 set screws. You can kind of see that with that spiral, like a drill bit, the tap strings just come out of the hole and don't stay stuck up into the tap. And there we are. We have that all done. We should just be able to put that on there, tighten that in, and we're all set to go. And we can try it out on the lathe. Okay, thanks. Okay, so we're going to finally assemble this. So this is an 1.25 inch collet. Slip these pieces in together. Slip this in here. And I have a bolt that I've cut the head down so that it'll fit through. And we just have to tighten that up. And now we can use this right on our lathe. And I can find the collet. So then that collet will go on like so. Go in the lathe, and we're ready to go. There's our pin chuck. So our block of wood bored out. We put the pin in the center. Slide your wood on. And turn your wood away from you, because that's the action that your chisel's going to take. And now that wood is fastened hard. Can't turn. In this case, I'm not working blind on a blind hole, so I can come in with my live center and just chuck that up. Just use a little bigger rest. If I want to shift that, I can just back it off, move it down, lock it up again. It's that easy. This is a piece of apple wood, and we're going to try and make this into a duck call. So leave a little bit of extra wood down here. We'll do a little shaping on this. And then we'll flip it around the other side. Put this end out so we can make a mouthpiece on this end. Actually, maybe I'll actually make the mouthpiece here, and we'll leave this end for the call itself, the reed. Okay, so we had a little blowout there. I was looking at the camera, trying to make sure I was good, and I had a catch. It split this holder, so I had to CA glue it back together again. And now we're just going to work out on this mouth, and hopefully you'll be able to see what I'm doing. So, just coming in. Like that. So it's nice rounded edge here I can work inside. We can do some final sanding on this. You can see it's running pretty true. Even though I had it off that mandrel, put it back on again. There's where our seam broke right there. So we'll just sand this up a little bit more. Give this just a layer of Nova Silk. So at this point, we could put on an oil finish on this. And we'd be ready to go. So that's our basic cowl body. A little ring here for your lanyard to hold on to. And we can give it, I'll find a mouthpiece for it and we'll give it a little try. So I've inserted a reed and a horn piece and put a lanyard on it, and we can give it a little try. And there we go. Another option is to actually have an MT2 turned right onto your shaft. So if you have a 3/4 inch shaft, you can make an MT2 taper on that shaft right here. Hard maybe to see. But that is an MT2. That could go straight in and a drawbar go on that. And now you've got something that will turn perfectly on your shaft with no intermediate parts to it. So if we wanted to turn, these pin chucks could also be used for making pens. So here I have a pin chuck that's made for a 3/8 brass inserted blank. This one has a 3/8 collar on it, so I could go with an MT2 with that, or I could use, this is an ER16 with a 3/8 collet in it. This just simply fits inside. That goes into your MT2. Put on a drawbar. Lock it in place. Just give this a little tighten. There we go. Now, this is an already turned one, partially turned. Put your pin in place. Slide your piece on. Lock it in. And now we can turn our pen. So it's a fast way to work, and because you're on a mandrel, your piece is always centered up. You know, you can take it off, you can put it back on, and it's going to be still centered. Unlike sometimes if you put it on to, if you're holding it with jaws, the jaws sink in a little bit too much and you end up with it being offset and eccentric. Okay. So now I'd like to talk to you about some other options that we could use for mandrels. So, mounted in the lathe right now, I have an 1.5 inch by 2 inch sanding disc. And sanding drum, I should say. And that could be used as a mandrel as well. Okay, so I've put a 3/4 inch sanding mandrel on. I'm just going to take that duck call that we were working on, slip it on, tighten up the nut. Expand out that rubber until we've got a good grip on it. I'm going to put another nut on there and just do a little lock so that it doesn't try and expand itself out as we use it. Now there's a little bit more wobble in that, especially out here on the end. It's wobbling a bit. Pretty good in here though. Pretty good in this section right here. So for small pieces of work, for instance, the birdhouses, etc., you could get away with doing this, making an expanding chuck. You know, you could use the 1 inch one for your birdhouse and go that route. Okay, so I have a block of Eastern red cedar or aromatic cedar mounted between centers. I'm going to put a 25mm tenon on this side, and then we'll mount it in a collet chuck and bore it out, and then we'll use the new mandrel that we made to put this together. Okay, let's get started. Fine. Just put it in the drawbar right now. I'm just going to part this off. A little longer than I need. Held using a collet chuck in the tailstock. So we have our hole done. We slipped in our mandrel, our expanding mandrel. Now we'll just tighten it up a bit, make it grip. So I've just put in an ER 20 collet holder with a 1/2 inch collet. Put it in the drawbar. Tighten it up. It's running pretty true. Just going to put the tailstock up for now while I'm roughing it out. And there we have it. So there we have the body of our Christmas tree birdhouse. Just have to drill the holes in it, make a top for it. So, at the end of the day, this worked out just fine to do this. You could have these set up for several different sizes, and especially if there was work that you were doing where you were doing multiples of things, and sometimes there's a little bit of play in the size of the hole that you're working with, you know, from sanding or whatever. You could make this longer if you wanted to. It really is an easy thing to make and use, really. I was surprised actually how centered this whole unit was when we turned it on. Okay, there we are. That's the end of our show. Thanks a lot. Bye.